Yeah. Make sure you guys do this with the engine completely cooled off, because it looks like we're going to be digging into the cooling system. So we just had to stop for about an hour and a half. We did some yard work to let it cool off, but we're going to start again. So let's go. All right, guys, so step one, find a convenient place for your choke. I've got a couple holes already made in the dash, but I might go ahead and use one of these other two spare ones. It looks like you need a 3/8 bit to drill through that. Next is to remove the nut and then feed it through the hole. While pulling that through, we're going to have to feed that through the firewall. We're going to try to go through this hole right here, and I'll back up to get a good placement on that. Make sure to fish the nut through, or the cable through the nut from the back side. There it is. Wait. All right, go ahead and tighten the nut to the back of the choke.
Most of you probably won't have a...
Don't worry, we got a YouTube certified master auto technician here.
handle.
You guys aren't going to have a big slit cut in the side of your dash, so you're just going to have to figure that out.
I know your headlight switch is going to fall off, right?
I don't think I need that. All right, once that's tightened, go ahead and just leave this cable running wild in the engine bay. We'll deal with that later. All right, next step. You want to disconnect all electrical plugs.
That'd be these three. I think I got some zip ties in there.
All right.
Zip tie all this shit up.
Next, when removing the water hose from the stock choke, beware the coolant might spill out. Have a 5/16 bolt handy to plug the hose to prevent excess coolant loss.
There's your hoses. Yeah, flat screw.
If you got a stubborn hose, use a pair of pliers. Grip it, but don't squeeze it too tight as to bend any of the fittings. Yeah. But in this case, that carburetor is going to be exchanged out, so that it wouldn't matter.
In most cases, your vehicle's probably got a coolant in it. It's going to spill out.
Yeah, you'll probably have coolant spilling out. This one won't, because it's a toy. My toy. And my toys get worked. All right, next up, go ahead and disconnect the fuel line. Okay, go ahead and, it says to cut the vacuum lines from the thermal switch, but we're just gonna go ahead and detach it. So this bolt here is going to be stubborn. It's going to be kind of hard, so they recommend taking the Egr valve off.
Which we're getting rid of anyway.
And yeah, it's getting deleted. You could take off this thing. I mean, anything on this carburetor you could pretty much take off because the new carb's not going to need it. Go ahead and remove the Egr valve. All right, since this is an aluminum intake, make sure you use a brass brush to clean the top off. You might want to stuff something in the holes to prevent material from falling in. However, I don't really care about that. This engine has been running on dirt and sweat and tears for many years.
And it's not mine, so.
And it's not his. Besides, he knows what he's talking about because he's a master auto technician. But I'd recommend to you, stuff something in there before you do this step. Use the supplied block-off plate gasketed hardware to cover these ports. All right, what we're going to do now is use 4 1/8 rubber caps and 1 1/4 rubber cap to plug the following locations. If you need more than these caps that are provided in the kit, you could always buy these rubber caps at the auto store. They're common. One of the stock carb choke water hoses, the longest one from below the manifold, will be looped back to the manifold next to the heater hose. Beware that all of these vacuum and coolant ports and plugs will need to be watched over for the next couple of heat cycles to check for leaks. Most rubber plugs will become hard and crack over time, and therefore these will need to be replaced sometime in the future. If your engine begins to run rough, check these vacuum locations. Even a small leak can cause noticeable problems, preventing the engine from running smoothly. All right, so the first thing we're going to show you here is you're going to find the PVC line, and then you're going to reuse that. That's going to be reused just like the stock carburetor. All right, we're going to go ahead and identify and plug the vacuum lines. We're going to make this very easy. I'm going to zoom in here.
Coming back at your water pump, all the way across, right behind the coolant.
Got it.
Low radiator hose.
You follow that, and that hose goes into that line right there.
Turn this hose clamp around.
Reroute the coolant hose going to the choke on the stock carb to this location, where the second choke coolant hose was located. The water will now just make a loop. You will find 3 hoses on top of the charcoal canister. The one hose closest to the engine is a vent line for the fuel tank. This one will be left in place from the canister downward to the metal fuel tank line. The other 2 will be removed from the canister. These are no longer used with the 3K carburetor. One line went to the intake manifold, providing a source of vacuum to suck gas fumes into the manifold. The second goes to the stock carburetor fuel bowl to vent gas fumes from the carburetor through the charcoal and into the manifold. These 2 lines must be left open to allow the gas tank to breathe. Should you be worried about high water or mud entering these 2 lines and plugging the canister, use 2 small lawnmower fuel filters and short lengths of these hoses to reroute the canister ports to higher ground, but do not plug these ports. When plugged, you may suck a vacuum in the gas tank and prevent gasoline from being pumped into the engine. That's an extreme case. In the future, if I ever want to go cross water crossings or anything like that, if I have a snorkel, what we can do is run those 2 hoses right there inside the snorkel up to the top of the snorkel and just match the height of that. That should be more than good enough. All right, great news. You're halfway done. Now it's time to install the carburetor. Installing the manifold gasket from the kit first. It is identified by having no vacuum notch from the bores. The 2 holes are different sizes, and the larger hole is positioned closest to the valve cover, away from the battery. Next, install new insulator from the kit, with the vacuum notch facing up. Lastly, The 3-gauge gasket is installed. It is the gasket with a vacuum notch, which will line up with the vacuum notch in the insulator. No gasket sealants or glues should be required if your manifold is true and flat. There's no harm in using sealants. These sealants just make removal and cleanup more difficult. At a later date, should removal be required, be sure to use a sealant that will work with gasoline. Some RTVs are not intended for gasoline. A sealant named Right Stuff is a good choice, as well as Indian Head and Permatex gasket cement. We're actually going to use this stuff, Permatex copper spray and gasket high temp sealant. We're going to go ahead and do that in the next clip. All right, so what we're going to go ahead and do with this sealant, what you're supposed to do is go ahead and spray all the sides of the components. In this case, we're going to spray the aluminum manifold first. This stuff needs a couple of minutes to sit on each part of the component to set up before installing entirely.
Don't need a lot. Don't need a lot.
Go ahead and place the new carb over the studs, installing the throttle bracket over the 2 studs closest to the valve cover. Thread all 4 nuts onto the stud before any single nut is tightened. You may need to move the carb around as the nuts are tightened. Tighten these nuts snugly. Avoid over-tightening and pulling a stud out of the aluminum manifold. That would be not good. It might be necessary before the next step to reroute some of the vacuum lines that are staying put. Since my engine's so badly destroyed and picked on, you probably can't hardly recognize what's going on here. But do the best you can, and we'll take it to the next step. Now we're going to install the throttle cable and choke cable. You may wish to drill or remount a small hole in the 3K carb bell crank to accept the new throttle cable end, but this can be tricky. We don't recommend it. We have provided a small screw and a nylon nut. There has been supplied a screw and a nylon nut with this kit as an alternative. If you got this kit, you see the instructions. There's pictures that show how the cable is routed and secured without using a drill ream method. We're going to show you that here. So how we're going to run the cable is this. So we're going to run it in front of the carburetor and connect it there. You're not going to want to tighten the throttle cable on the bracket just yet. You're going to want some slack to do this next step. I'm going to try to get a nice close shot here so you can see what's going on. Look how he uses his fingers. He's single, ladies.
You held it to the floor. I pulled out until it couldn't pull anymore. Put it back in a little bit. Adjusted the nut down. That's our adjustment.
And this is the nut you're talking about.
Right. So now when you go full throttle, your cable goes, it stops here, just shy of hitting.
Right.
At full throttle.
Nice. Okay.
What are we reading?
With the cable installed, be sure to check for adjustment. There should be zero tension on the cable with the throttle closed, and the foot pedal should allow for full open throttle. There is a small stop bolt located under the foot pedal that limits travel to some degree. This may require adjustment to allow full throttle. It takes 2 people to check this, one smashing the gas pedal and the second watching the carburetor linkage. If the throttle does not travel enough, grab the foot pedal and pull it upwards towards the steering wheel. The small foot pedal arm can be bent over the years and limit pedal travel. Pulling it out will restore the travel or increase travel. Adjust the throttle cable at the new bracket to achieve proper operation. Cable may now be threaded onto the carb bracket. This comes with the carburetor. With the cable positioned as you wish, Nice sweeping curves and no sharp bends. Mark the cable for trimming if required.
Not required, but when necessary.
You're going to want to cut off the bent end. If needed, you can mark where to cut the housing, place tape to use the mark. With the cable marked, the inner cable wire may be pulled out of the outer cable housing. With the wire withdrawn far enough to clear the necessary cut, use diagonal pliers, side cutters, to cut the cable housing. Or you could use a hacksaw, like we're going to do here. Look at the end to be sure the opening is clear. Replace the choke cable wire all the way into the housing. The cable may be confirmed stopped at the end of the stroke. As it is pushed into the cable housing, the knob has a small dent to hold the choke off. Replace the shortened cable housing into the bracket and thread inner cable into the cable wire clamp. Back the screw out to accept the wire. With the knob in the choke off position, all the way pushed in, and the choke on the carburetor is off, all the way towards the Samurai battery, now tighten the cable wire clamp and check operation. If the cable is difficult, make sure you have no hidden sharp turns, binding, or cable housing. If all is operational, trim excess wire off the cable wire clamp.
I think I'm going to cut another little bit off there. Go ahead and pull that cable that far out. Okay. We're kind of going to do this the same way as the
Explain it to the camera as we do it.
so pull it all the way out. We're going to adjust it. Oops, see, that's why I don't. I want it to be a little bit long so that I can bend it over at the end so it'll stay in a little bit better. So the choke's all the way off right now. Did you push it all the way until it clicked? I would hold this with something so that it doesn't bend. Okay. Go ahead and pull it all the way out. Okay, push it all the way in. There's our choke adjustment. So we'll tighten this a little bit. That's right. All the way closed, all the way open. A little bit of back and forth there.
All right, this is the last couple of steps, so congratulations if you made it this far. The vacuum advance may now be connected. The fuel line may be connected too. Use clamps on the fuel lines. It is not necessary to use clamps on vacuum lines. We recommend you use new vacuum and fuel lines if the stock rubber lines have become hard and non-pliable. All right, the last couple of steps. Check all the bolts, clamps, vacuum plugs for confirmed installation. Top off the radiator with coolant if too much was lost during the installation. The certified machine carburetor will come properly adjusted, ready to run. For proper adjustment, a wideband O2 sensor is highly recommended. Other methods may produce good results, but proper air-fuel ratio can only be achieved with an AF gauge. The kit comes with a spacer ring kit. Our 3K swap kits come with an air cleaner spacer ring kit. The air cleaner ring spaces up the stock air cleaner hat enough to clear the linkage of the carburetor. This kit...
Because words.
A large ring gasket goes on first onto the carb, followed by the aluminum ring, then another large ring gasket. The stud nut assembly is installed into the carb and threaded in as far as it will go. A washer gasket is placed onto the stud with the gasket surface facing up. With the items installed, place the stock hat onto the carb. The washer gasket should just touch the inside surface of the hat. If the washer gasket holds the hat up from sealing onto the aluminum ring, simply thread the nut down the stud until the hat can seal. With the hat in place, install the second washer gasket onto the stud with the gasket facing on top, down. Top it off with the wing nut. The wing nut should compress the hat onto the gasket under the carb to hold securely. You may need to adjust a nylon nut accordingly to get a good snug fit. And then finally, the rest should be pretty obvious. So never operate your vehicle without an air filter. Dirt can destroy your engine quickly. And make sure you bring it up to temperature, then check for leaks. I need a new air filter, which is why you're not seeing us put one on right now. But because this is Rosenberg Ranch and this is Dr. Crawl, we're going to go ahead and run it anyways. This is going to be just music playing. Look at the skeleton. He's trying to get out. He's gonna hit a tree. Yeah.
Still idling pretty high. Gotta turn that down.
Oh shit. That's got to be 4 high. Yeah, it's still got to be. It's got to be. You're not gonna be able to go that fast in 4 low. I don't remember.
All the way forward should be 4 low.
Try it.
Or is that 4 high?
That's probably 4 high. It's the same as the last one.
That's what.
That was exactly the same. Remember, it's 4 to 1 and 4 low.
Right. I put it 4 high. We'll try to kill it to move without touching the gas. That's low. And he kills it.
Yeah, dude. Goes over here. What the hell were we talking about right now?
The thermal switch for the.
Oh yeah, it comes with 2 large ring gaskets. Steel washers with gaskets glued in place. 1 stud assembly with a nylon knock. Knock-a-nucky-daka-daka. I don't even have to read this part, I don't think. The assembly sequence can't be seen in the following photo.